The purpose of this conversation and future conversations on this channel is education, understanding, and growth. I have no intention of hostility and wish for all parties involved or discussed to live happy, fruitful lives. To outline my background, I'm an anarcho-capitalist. I support the teachings of David D. Friedman, Russell Brand, and Michael Malice. My guests today are Jeffery Shull, a returning guest on the show, and Alex Condra. Would you each like to say a brief description of your political background and current activities?
Jeff, go ahead, bud.
All right. I'm a libertarian. I'm on the executive committee of the Libertarian Party of Georgia, and I am chair of the Northwest Georgia affiliate and organizer for the Mises Caucus. I am inspired by people like Ron Paul and Murray Rothbard and Ludwig von Mises, and just general disdain for the state.
Yeah, brother. I'm actually an anarchist. I don't particularly subscribe to any particular faction. I think if I did, it would be more anarcho-individualism, kind of under the Lysander Spooner school of thought. Definitely have a lot of respect for the anarcho-capitalist side. No political activities like a true anarchist. I don't care enough. I think these people are criminals. They should all be in jail. So, I'm not going to advocate for any of these policies. I believe in true freedom, as long as it doesn't harm anybody else or, take their stuff. So I guess if I had to pick a line of thinking on that, though, it would be more along Lysander Spooner, Albert Camus. I'm a big Michael Malice fan, but even Emma Goldman, Peter Kropotkin, the first libertarians were socialists. It was kind of a different definition back then, as in kind of more of a scientific rethinking on, what's the best way for us to increase human flourishing rather than what socialism is today. But they were very much violently anti-capitalist in the sense of anti-corporatism, anti-cronyism. I think that's really, for me, politically, that's really the only way forward for human flourishing is less coercion, less force. So any line of thought that's within that purview, those are my people.
Yeah, absolutely. So first question, one which I'll let Alex answer, as Jeffrey already answered in a prior episode. Do you believe that all humans are intelligent?
Yes, I do. I think, so I worked with adults who have mental disabilities for 5 years right out of college. And that's kind of the first thing that comes to mind is even in the most extreme circumstances, cerebral palsy, not ambulatory, nonverbal, they can still communicate. To me, I mean, if the definition of intelligence is, being able to manipulate your environment to your benefit, to an advantage, communication is one way that we do that and mitigate a lot of risks and save a lot of time. So, I think everybody in their own way has the ability to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And so as I understand it, Alex, you majored in economics, is that correct?
I did. I graduated from University of Tennessee in 2008 with 1 degree in political science, nonprofit management, and public administration with a concentration in legal studies. And my second degree was in economics.
Okay, awesome. So despite being so well-versed in government policies, you decided to reject all of it.
Yeah, 100%. It is indoctrination. It's the universities, public universities specifically, are the ones that are kind of leading the forefront on, it's you kind of pick up on it immediately when you start hearing things in economic concepts like all other things held constant, which means just ignore this for now to make this equation work. Basically, that's kind of the scenic route to saying that. So once you start to see things like that, and it's like, okay, well, if I have to ignore inflation to make this model work, is this model really valid? And I started questioning that very early on in my academic career. I studied the Austrian school and the Chicago school long after I'd gotten out of college. But I knew while I was in the middle of it that there is at least somewhat of an attempt at indoctrination here. The way that actually me and Jeffrey were talking about this yesterday, the way they calculate unemployment, but they ignore the workplace participation rate because the unemployment rate's the only one that anybody talks about. So, as long as it's 5.5% or whatever, everybody's happy and it looks good. But if you have a 60% workplace participation rate, that's effectively, 40% off the rip of the workforce that's not working, not being productive. So there's a lot of little, tips and tricks and stuff that they can use to display numbers to the people that look valid and they look good to a certain extent, but it doesn't match what's happening in reality.
Yeah, absolutely. So wealth can only be accumulated by the earnings of industry and the savings of fragility. That was a quote by John Tyler, our 10th American president. What are your guys' thoughts on this quote? Jeffrey, you go first.
All right. It's a good quote. I mean, I feel like people, when you say things like, the earnings of industry, they assume, some factory owner enslaving the working class, yada, yada. But, it's also your labor. You know what I mean? This is my labor and I'm going to sell it to you for this. And then you can take that using frugality and investments to just, make your money work for you. So, yeah, it's a good quote. And it applies to a lot of situations.
I do agree with it at face value, but he is wrong in the sense that that's as far as achieving the goals of human flourishing and not moving backwards from that kind of thing. Even there's absolutely. It's going to take trade, it's going to take ingenuity and human effort. But no, I mean there are other ways to amass wealth, and we've seen that. There's there are nefarious ways. But I mean, we watched Mitch McConnell and Nancy Pelosi do it for 30 years now. So there are ways to illegitimately amass wealth and hang on to it. So I don't think John Tyler is entirely correct in his quote. I understand what he means, and at face value, he is correct, but there are other ways to do that. They're very nefarious ways, and they're damaging ways to society and to people as a whole. But certainly industry is not the only way you can do it by theft. And there are very elaborate ways that you can commit that theft.
Yeah. I feel like John Tyler was definitely having a, rose-tinted perspective of things with that. But I do like his, what he means with it. But,
yeah, I definitely think it's like playing off what Alex said. I think it's maybe assuming the best in people is what creates that quote to be true. But when you get people who are not trying to do things by the book, then it becomes untrue. Absolutely.
Especially when they're writing the book.
Yeah.
I think a better way to say it is if you remove the conditions in the environment of coercion, with Jeff Bezos, with Warren Buffett, I mean, if you took the predictability out of the market, would Warren Buffett be worth what he's worth? And that predictability comes from the state engineering these things. And so, we can get into that much later on, but I unequivocally would have to say no. Jeff Bezos would not be worth what he's worth without, we saw it over the last 2 years where all of his competition had to shut down. He's, one of 6 multinational conglomerates that were allowed to operate. Mm-hmm. So yeah, of course that's going to increase his wealth, and it's going to do it in an unfair manner, and it's going to do it in a manner where he doesn't really have to put as much effort into it, nor do his workers as they did, 2 years before that when they had competition or whatever. So, that's kind of a rough analog, but that's pretty much proof positive, that John Tyler is, again, I know what he's aiming at there, but we've seen it. We've seen a lot of very engineered and nefarious ways where people have established that wealth and been able to hang on to it. And I highly doubt that if they didn't have the state married to them, that they wouldn't be there. They wouldn't be in that position.
Yeah. So starting with Alex, what is inflation and how can we prevent it?
Inflation is the devaluation of the currency. Just like anything else, money is subject to supply and demand. The example that I like to use, because a lot of people look at it like it's an increase in prices, and the macroeconomic view from state universities is going to be, inflation, the really only cost that's associated with inflation is shoe leather cost. Shoe leather cost is like an old school, and it's literal, where you have to replace your shoes more often because you have to make more trips to the bank, because the Keynesian view of inflation is if prices are increasing, then a wage is a price for labor, therefore wages are increasing. But we know that that's not always true. So, that's a symptom, is the increase in prices. The overall cause is printing money, devaluing the currency. And the example that I like to use is if you could go out. If there was as many dollar bills in circulations as there are leaves on trees, what's the difference? Why would you use one over the other? So, that's inflation in a nutshell. There are plenty of explanations out there that only kind of halfway address the problem, or it's a symptom of the problem. The problem itself is a monopoly control over the currency, and the price, which is the interest rate, is also homogenized and controlled by monopoly. So we're seeing the results of that monopoly control right now. And I was just reading earlier, I think home values since January of last year are up like 29.7% national average. And we look at that like it's bad unless you own a home. So
yeah,
there's definitely shades of gray to it, but asset inflation is inflation, and these things get more expensive. If you don't have a home and you're trying to buy one, you definitely feel that right now.
Alex definitely said it better than I could, for sure. But yeah, I mean, that's really what inflation comes down to. People want to call it corporate greed when prices go up.
Yeah.
You also have the most economically illiterate people trying to have the strongest opinions about it. Most notably, our government. No, it's like you were saying with Bezos and the state controlling the winners and the losers. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They engineer these issues.
Right.
I mean, the Federal Reserve is probably extremely responsible for a lot of our economic issues.
I would say probably 100%. I mean, things with the entire lay of the land, if we had competing currencies and the market determined the rate of interest on each of those currencies, it certainly would be worse. Competition has never made things worse. Human conditions have never degraded because you had more choices. So, and that's, indisputable. You can go back and look through history. I mean, it's, if you've got a whole lot of crappy choices, even that can turn out better than, one unilateral monolithic choice. So,
yeah.
And that's another thing too, that I think kind of off topic, but, people don't often realize that sometimes politics and life and especially economics comes down to, it's not always good choice, bad choice. Sometimes it's two bad choices. And that's just life. That's the human condition. But yeah, overall, it's that I would say that the Federal Reserve is the root of economic turmoil. It took, regional banking panics in the 1880s and turned them into a systemized national crisis. And the Great Depression is their first foray into that.
Yeah. So if no one paid taxes, how do you think it would affect our economy and maybe directly affect inflation?
Now, when you say if no one paid taxes, now, so are we talking about they abolished taxes?
Yeah.
Hypothetically?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I really think the economy would flourish because more people would have more money to participate with it. And think about it, a lot of the tax laws they have to help, poor people end up hitting them the hardest. I mean, how are you going to claim to be helping a group of people and then raise their tax debt? It makes no sense. So a lot of people that normally have a lot less money than they normally have would be able to do things they wouldn't normally be able to do, especially, different economic participations.
Yeah.
Some people be able to open jobs or open businesses they wouldn't normally be able to afford to do.
Mm-hmm.
I think it would definitely help the economy all around.
Yeah, long run, it definitely would. And that's definitely a long run outlook. Short run, it would be very tumultuous. But again, long run, that would be more money for consumption and more importantly, investment. And, with short run, there's going to be a lot of economic issues, the things that have to be unwound. And that's, under the abolition model where we, use the proper channels that they control to abolish that. But, I think it would be even more tumultuous under the assumption that everybody, what are they going to do if 30 million people decide I'm not paying my taxes anymore? I'm tired of bombing hospitals in Yemen. So I'm not doing it, and what could they possibly do, So, but I think in the short run, months to weeks to months to a year, maybe a little longer than that, there would be a lot of market readjustments. There's a lot of, in the military industrial complex relies heavily on printed money and tax dollars. What that would do to inflation, the Keynesian view is that taxation is a means to control inflation. So it pulls money out of circulation, which they'll readily admit that inflation's not that. They'll say that 1% of unemployment is something like 66 times more harmful to the economy than 1% of inflation. I don't really know how you'd quantify that. I've never bothered to try to run the numbers on it, but I do know, because for me, it doesn't really matter which one's worse. It's that they're both bad and that people suffer under both circumstances, and that's what's important. So, I don't know exactly what that would do to inflation. I guess it depends on if you look at the Keynesian models or the Austrian models or Chicago models or whatever, saltwater schools, freshwater schools, whatever. But it definitely, there would be a lot of adjustments in the very beginning for industries that rely on those tax dollars. The entire green energy sector would collapse overnight, because that's the only thing that's propping them up is subsidy dollars. So, that's it would be a complicated situation. A lot of people would benefit, a lot of people would suffer. But for the natural order of things, I think overall it would be beneficial, and it would put capital back in the hands of the people that aren't going to use it recklessly.
Mm-hmm. And I think of it and maybe this is coming from like a privileged perspective, but I think of it how both me and my wife have full-time jobs. If taxes were eliminated and we got 100% of our paycheck, and we also didn't have to pay taxes on, the goods that we buy, we could easily become a one-income household and be perfectly fine.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people don't even realize that, honestly.
Right. Well, and then from there, it's so indisputable that the United States, by the numbers, is the most charitable nation on the planet. Even now with, government basically, there are a lot of good charities out there, but the state has essentially taken the incentive away. It's like, well, we're taking your tax dollars for welfare now. And obviously, it leaves you with less money overall that you could donate. But, when private charities are left to fill a gap, and they're kind of, it's not necessarily a competition, but, there are other places that will be doing the same thing. And, there's people that find a lot of value in working for charities. And, it is a job that should be compensated. And when that's under threat, there's a lot of them out there where 9 cents or 90 cents of every dollar doesn't even make it to the recipient, and stuff like that. And a lot of people just don't care because, well, the government's supposed to be taking care of it. So, when you have private charities that have to be responsible and as efficient as possible to deliver the means to the end there, then if they're not doing a very good job, then people are going to take those jobs elsewhere. That is a job. That's going to take clerical people. It's going to take people with their boots on the ground, possibly delivering food, things like that. That's something that's always going to be there. I think, as anarchists and libertarians, a lot of times we're called the utopians, but it's like, I'm realistic about this. This is something that's always going to exist. This is always going to be here. It has been for 100,000 years of this genus. So, it's this idea of like trying to eliminate these natural hierarchies and stuff. Some people are going to be physically more fit. Some people are going to be smarter. That's always going to be there. And if we're going to try to organize society based on emotion instead of intelligence, those are going to be really bad hierarchies to be in. Who can be the most emotional? That's a terrible hierarchy. But
right.
Fast at solving problems, let them do their thing.
So, should the government be involved in our economy, if only to provide a form of standardized currency? Alex, you want to start?
Absolutely not. No, absolutely not. That there's no benefit that can come from this. Now, I think people are being reasonable. There's a giant subsection of the left. I call them we need some welfare liberals, who are like, we need somebody has to have a basic standard for like how to operate, what you're not allowed to do. Pollution, that's a market failure. A lot of times people think market failure means, well, there was a market that was supposed to solve this problem and it derailed. That's not what a market failure is. Like, pollution is a market failure. A market failure is when a cost is imposed upon you that you didn't know about or you didn't agree to take. And so pollution is a market failure. And I think there's some valid points to be made from like the Dennis Kucinich type Democrats that can look at this in a very sensible manner and say, don't dump PCBs in water. Can we put people in jail if they do that? Like, yeah, absolutely. That's perfectly reasonable. And I'm even kind of on the side of like, I would much rather see an inefficient government program feeding people who are starving than people starve. So, there are certain areas where I'll bend on that, but as far as the general economy, these are people making choices for themselves through voluntary interaction, and each individual should be left alone to make the decisions that best fit their lives and that best think that that's going to work out for their lives. And that's another area where rational choice theory has been bastardized, where it's value judgments now. Rational choice theory does not dictate to people that they make value judgments on other people's decisions on whether it was rational or not. The assumption is to be made that they made a rational decision, and now the consequences of that decision are theirs and theirs alone. So, I think a lot of that is missing when we're talking about government being involved in the economy, that, we don't trust people. We don't think that they're going to act responsibly and marginalize them. That's what ostracization is for. So, if somebody's being nefarious and they're trying to defraud people or harm others, then they should starve. And that is a huge motivator to keep people in line. If you're not going to associate with anybody more and sell them groceries or fix their car or whatever it is, because that they're just trash human beings, they're going to have a really hard time surviving if they try to, go to illicit measures to get what they need. And that's what self-defense is for. So, from where I'm looking at it, yeah, I mean, there's not really much of an opportunity for the government to intervene. The only thing I can really think of where it would be beneficial is if they had like sensible pollution policies where they outlay, here are the things that you're responsible for, and if you cross these lines, there's going to be jail time. Of course, the United States government's one of the largest polluters on the planet. So are they really the ones that need to be policing this? But that's really the only area where I can even come up with a modicum of reasoning as to why the government should be involved in the economy.
I agree that they shouldn't be involved in the economy. Look around, as a really good example of why they shouldn't.
Yeah.
They give us paper money, tell us it's worth X amount, and we have to smile and nod and, try to buy bread with it. It's ridiculous. That's why they're so afraid of things like Bitcoin, and they're trying to regulate all of that. They don't like the thought of something like currency being decentralized. Mm-hmm. But these are also, the central planners of our world. Yeah. So, generally most questions that start with should the government be are instantly no, not at all.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I look at it like this, to take a page from Yaron Brooks' book is, iPhones. Mm-hmm. Tell me the government group full of apparatchiks that could have come up with this. And anybody who thinks that can happen, I'm going to call them a liar, because that's not. Go to the DMV and see if they can make an iPhone. And that's again another rough analog. But these things are anarchistic in and of themselves. People look at anarchism like it's like Michael Malice says, right? I've always said that this is not a system. This is a natural order, and he says it's a relationship, not a location, and that's the perfect way to describe it. You're looking at things in terms of like, okay, this is the political system and this is how things would be organized. No, that's not. Language is anarchistic. Music is anarchistic. These things didn't come about because some apparatchik was scratching out on a pad at his desk in his chambers of Congress or whatever it is, saying, these are going to be the rules for language, and this is what music's going to sound like. These things happened over the course of time through things like culture, and language developed on its own as an anarchistic measure where there was no state involved. These things just happen naturally because of human ingenuity and people coming together and creating these things over time on their own. And think about the thousands of languages that there are out there. And again, that can have some complications when you're interacting with other people on the other side of the globe. But we've got ways to figure that out now. So I don't think that anybody can look back over the course of language and say, well, that was a bad idea. We shouldn't have left that up to, decide what it is that they wanted to do there. And the same with music. Nobody's going to say that about music, or, relationships are anarchistic. All three of us, even if we got in a fight, the chances of us getting the state involved are slim, So, every nation is in a state of anarchy towards every other nation. And, we have an anarchistic relationship with Spain. Our laws don't have anything to do with them. Their laws don't have anything to do with us. They're separate governing bodies, and that's anarchism. So, people just don't have the right mind frame when they're looking at this to begin with. I was in that camp for a while. I didn't understand it. I always looked at it like this is a political system. This is going to replace the United States government. It's like, no, it's not how it works.
Mm-hmm. Jeff, does the current president-elect actually affect the price of gasoline going in my car?
I mean, not in the sense that he sat down and said, all right, guys, $5 a gallon, who's with me? Nothing like that. But, foreign policies can affect that. Economic policies can affect that. Trade issues can affect that. So, I mean, in a sense, yes, but also not in the sense that a lot of people think he does.
Right.
Yeah, he does and he doesn't. There's when people say, well, he doesn't have the lever on the desk in the Oval Office to control what gas prices are going to be today. It's like, that's an oversimplification, because that the executive branch and that the state itself is responsible for energy policy, and energy policy directly dictates what the price is going to be at the pump. It's not all the price. And we're not the only government that's involved in the state. There's other governments that are part of this too, but this is very much a nationalized industry that is regulated from wall to wall. It's the textbook definition of small f fascism, is where we get our energy from. And there's not an area where they're not involved. It's fossil fuels, it's green energy, it's nuclear, like everything. And from where I sit on the spectrum, I'm looking at that and it's like, well, the two things you need to control if you want complete control over human life is energy sources, which includes food and access to water. Mm-hmm. And after that, you control movement. And then, from there, all you have to do is just sow discord among the population, create a caste system, and you've got North Korea. I mean, that's basically where that heads, So 2 out of the 3 are taken care of there for the most part.
Yeah.
I'm being facetious there. We're nowhere close to that. But North Korea has been an absolute horrific prison state. And a lot of people lost their sense of proportion over America and where it sits in the world. But nonetheless, they do control energy policy, and that does have a direct effect on what you pay for energy, including in your home, not just in your car.
Mm-hmm.
There's a reason they don't tolerate, privatizing the power grids and, the water companies. Look at how much of an issue they had just trying to, privatize postal service.
Right. Yeah. And then you can think about the UP. I'm 35 years old, man. So a lot of people younger than me don't remember how garbage USPS was back in the day. They didn't have 2-day shipping before UPS and FedEx introduced it. They didn't have, package tracking. Your mail got there when it got there, if at all.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, I can't count how many packages my, grandparents didn't get. Just, early 90s. It was kind of a crapshoot.
Yeah.
Yep. And of course now, I think during COVID, it's kind of gone back to that, even though it's not supposed to have been. One of my buddies ordered something through UPS, and it was taking like forever to get to him, and they couldn't find the package. And he went down to UPS. He was like, "Hey, where's my package? I need this thing." And they're like, "We have no idea where it is. It says it's here, but we have no idea where it is."
Yeah.
And they actually offered to. They were like, "Dude, do you want to go in the back and look? Because we don't have it." He went into the back and found it within 5 minutes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's an oligopoly, man, and it operates just like, there's like 4 of them, including the government. You get DHL, FedEx, UPS, or United States Postal Service.
Mm-hmm.
There may be a few others there, but that's basically it. As far as international shipping, and of course USPS isn't going to go international, but transcontinental shipping here in the U.S. from Maine to California, that's your options basically. So, and they understand that, and they operate just like that. They operate like they have that understanding. If you had 25 of them to choose from,
mm-hmm.
you probably have somebody that could get it there in 6 hours if you're willing to pay. So.
Absolutely. Alex, as a taxpayer, how do we best hold the government accountable for the money that we give them?
You don't. There's, people talk about voting. I don't vote. I'm an anarchist. I don't participate in the system. I couldn't think of a bigger waste of time to stand in line all day and then check a box next to Chuck Flashman's name and then act like everybody else is dumb for not doing that. So there's really no way to do it. I mean, if you don't, they will send men with guns to your home to kick in your door and haul you off to a cage. So you really don't have a choice. There's not really any way to hold them accountable. We've seen that. We're $30 trillion in debt. We spent 20 years in Afghanistan to replace the Taliban with the Taliban. And, nobody's had to answer for this. It's, the can's been kicked down the road. This is stressed across many presidential administrations, including ones before we were alive. So, there's no really, that right there is proof positive that there's nobody to hold accountable, and their approach to it is basically, what are you going to do about it? And that right there should piss off enough people to start stacking bodies over this. But, 80% of the country's behind it.
Yeah. It's bizarre to me how little people really think about that. They just think, well, that's all fine. They can go play war and stuff as long as you're covering this specific issue that I care about, and not doing this one way.
Right.
Yeah.
A lot of people
it's people are such, one issue voters. Like, you'll vote for someone who has promised to, rein in just, nuclear war on everyone, but they're good on this one issue, guys. So we really got to stick to that.
Yeah. And it's not even, it's just the promise is good. It's not that they're good in implementation.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like, look at the Supreme Court. I don't take that body seriously because the people that are supposed to keep the government in check are handpicked by those people.
Yeah. I'm just that type of person that's in people's lives that, I'm like, look, you voted for this guy under this premise that he was going to do this, and he hasn't. He's done the exact opposite. And they know this about you, so you should feel stupid, but you don't. And that's, if somebody was doing this to you personally and continuing to make promises that they never fulfilled, would you have anything? Would you associate with them anymore? I wouldn't.
No.
Like if my legs had been cut off and they were promising to feed my family, but my family was starving, I would be asking questions. It's like, that's fine if you don't want to do that, but don't say that you are, so that I plan on this and then you don't. And the government does that to us every day. But the problem is people defend it. People will defend the job that Joe Biden's doing, or the job that Donald Trump did, or Obama, regardless of how many dead bodies they have behind them, regardless of how much human suffering and immiseration that they've imparted on society. And it's, I refuse to believe I'm the crazy one. I've got eyeballs in my head. I see this happening in real time. I'm not the utopian. I'm not the crazy one. So, this is right here in front of our faces. And, people will defend it. And reality will show them the exact opposite, and they will still defend it.
I agree with Alex's summary that, who's going to hold them accountable? Like when, look at the famous CIA crack deal that they did, when it was brought up, they're like, well, we'll look into it. We found that we didn't do anything.
Yeah.
That's not our crack, guys. Yeah. We decided.
Yeah.
It's like, okay. And if there is, a body that would hold them accountable, there would be tampering, there would be blackmail involved. Those people would have their lives ruined. So,
I think, go ahead.
What can you do to hold these people accountable? Because, as a private citizen, if it gets to a certain level, we, unfortunately sometimes have to appeal to like state police. Yeah. But when the state is the one aggressing, who do you appeal to?
Right. A higher level of the state, which they don't have to do a good job. They don't care. So what are you going to do about it? That's
right. You got to go to another state? No.
Yeah. That's their approach. And that's, of course, who's the two most diametrically opposed I could think of? Mitch McConnell and AOC on the surface seem like they have nothing in common, but at the end of the day, if the House is going to start cutting each other up, the reason that they don't look, I find it very strange that Denny Hastert was convicted of pedophilia. He was 100% caught with children, and the Democrats haven't raised a stink about this. That's really, really strange to me. In such a competitive arena, there's 535 seats or whatever out of 330 million people. So, that's very, very strange to me that the DNC hasn't made this a central part of their strategy. They never did. This was buried. And so for me, Mitch McConnell and AOC are a lot more alike than they are different. And like I said, when it comes to cutting each other down, they're not going to do it, because AOC is looking at this like, if I could do this to Mitch McConnell, then somebody from the Republican side can find dirt on me and do it to me. So they're watching out for each other. I know everybody thinks that she's this amazing, fresh breath of air. She's a statist. I mean, she's an apparatchik, and because she's a ballast. That's all she is to me. And I don't care what revolutionary stuff she has to say. I don't think she's particularly brilliant. I'm not apologizing for that stance. She has a degree in economics just like I do. And some of the stuff she says, I think she just makes it up. She just pulls it out of thin air. I mean, we went through the same education, and she can't even get the indoctrination part right. So from where I'm sitting, man, I mean, I'm looking at this, and I don't trust either one of them. They're in the same camp as far as I'm concerned. There's no difference between Mitch McConnell and Ocasio-Cortez to me.
Yeah, especially if you look at their voting records, they vote alike a lot.
Mm-hmm. It's the same thing with everybody claims that Bernie Sanders is anti-war while he's bedded down a ton of MIC companies in his state. And I've gone back through and looked at his voting record. Anybody can look at this up. And the only no vote that he's had pretty much his entire career was on HJ Resolution 114, which is the authorization to start the war in Iraq. He voted that down. He voted to start the war in Afghanistan. And he's voted on every expansion and appropriation bill to fund these wars since. So how anti-war are you really? And you can go look this up. I've got the list. Anybody that wants to try to dispute that, I would be glad to. This is all before his 2016 run. When his time in Senate, it's just chock full of yes votes for expand this war, up the funding for this war, start this war. He was 100% behind Clinton in his bombing campaigns in Eastern Europe in the 90s. He's been pretty soft on shutting down Guantanamo Bay. These are things that you can YouTube his interviews and he talks about, and people will see that and just still flat out lie for him like he's an anti-war candidate because that's the guy they like. I don't like him, and I'm not going to, and I don't have to. The dude is a chicken hawk.
But the billionaires.
Yeah, that's fine. We'll send poor people's kids to fight overseas under Bernie Sanders' directive as long as we can get back at the billionaires. It's nonsensical.
But they might get free college.
Right. Yeah, but we're supposed to care about poor people. So,
we're sending the poor people to die for the free college, so they can, take care of that awesome government provided, post-war healthcare.
Yeah, I'm all for free college. I think everybody should have to go through a state-funded university and listen to that. I mean, I'm serious. It's like, yeah, sure, you should absolutely be conscripted to go through 4 years of college and listen to. Now, I mean, not all of it. The STEM fields are fine. Pretty much universally, but you get into these social sciences and people try to argue with me like I don't have the receipts on it, and I've been through it. You're not going to teach me anything about this. So sit through that and have to make up your own mind. I would not be an anarchist today had I not gone to college. I'll tell you that. Yeah, that's how bad it is.
Yeah, that's pretty fascinating. So Jeff, given an absolute choice between leftist policies and right-wing policies, which one of the two are going to help me succeed the most financially?
Are we talking like left and right economic policies or social policies or just economics? Well, considering that most like market economics are considered extreme right-wing, in that sense, I'd have to say the right-wing economic policies. You can't centrally plan, human interaction even if it's a financial situation. Plus, extreme like the market stuff, voluntary cooperation. That's really what it comes down to. Why would I do any kind of transaction that would not be beneficial? Why would you do a transaction that would not be beneficial? You get into the left-wing policies and it starts losing the voluntary aspect of it and becomes a lot of coercion. Look at the whole, a lot of our government owns a lot of stocks in like Pfizer and things like that. So now they make it mandatory to, purchase the Pfizer product. You get that with left economic policies.
Yeah, there's 2 election cycles before that, they were, all about Occupy Big Pharma, and they were anti-vax under Trump. And now all of a sudden, everybody has to be a customer for these big pharma companies. We should mandate this. It's from where, so Jeff is answering this from where, the right wing has been placed today. And so a lot of people talk about individualism. Look, I took a class on individualism when I was in college, and like the first day the guy showed The Birth of a Nation. So, like American individualism, and he's showing Birth of a Nation. It's like, okay, so the most collectivist entity that you could think of in United States history, which is the KKK, you're going to use that to represent American individualism. I think I'm going to be dropping this class. But it's if that's what people define as right-wing policies, fine, then I'm right-wing. I believe in individualism. I believe in freedom. I believe in voluntary association, voluntary cooperation, and voluntary transactions. If we're talking about what actual right-wing economic policies are, they're no different than left-wing policies. All they do is just make it applicable to a certain group of people, and usually that's determined by race. So that doesn't work out well either. So the results are the same under socialism or under fascism. It's all sorts of central planning and policy and government-controlled industry. And all that does, we've seen the results of that. There's no need in even trying to rehash that. You've seen it in Cambodia. You've seen it in China, Korea, Russia. You've seen it in Eastern Europe, Africa, everywhere that they've tried this. And it's crossed racial lines and ethnic lines and religious lines. It has led to nothing but human suffering. And that's all forms of collectivism, not just left-wing or right-wing collectivism. They all have the same result. So under the pure definitions of either one, neither are going to work. The only one that is freedom and voluntary association. And, a lot of people are trying to label those as right-wing principles now. Fine. Then we're going to be right-wing.
Oh, yeah. It's like you're saying, the secret to human flourishing is voluntary cooperation.
Yeah.
And people want to bring up, morals. Well, economics aren't necessarily, anything to do with morality. Plus, is it really moral if I'm being forced to do an act? I know I mentioned it last time, but it's a good point.
Yeah, that's digging into philosophy a lot, and that comes from like the Platonist point of view, which is, a lot of people talk about how Marxism's useful idiots from France have infected Western academia. This was a problem long before Marxism, and this started with this is from the Platonist tradition, where the idea and the emotion is just as real as reality, and that funneled down through Rene Descartes and through Immanuel Kant, and that's an absolute blight on the human condition. We come from the Aristotelian tradition that says reality is real, and if the idea needs to be real, then you need human ingenuity and human effort to make it real, and that's very much an Aristotle type thing. Socrates took from both Plato and Aristotle, but the Aristotelian tradition falls right in line through Albert Camus and Lysander Spooner and Ayn Rand, and it's very much Plato and Socrates weren't debating individualism, but they were debating the nature of reality. And so you had Rene Descartes kind of took the Platonist tradition and said, I think, therefore I am, which is I know I have the ability to think, so I know I exist. So I sit in my armchair and I deduce reality. But the Aristotelian tradition is like, no, you have to measure and look and compare and contrast and do all of these things to find out what reality is. The ideas don't exist until you make them real. And, that whole Kantian philosophy is what is that infected Western academia long before Marxism did. And it's, okay, so that's a little bit of a problem, but, we look at this in terms of, I can't think of a good example of where the Platonism, but, just kind of what we've been discussing here. That all falls right in line with the Platonist tradition, and that shapes how people think. And they do think in collectives. It's like when Rick Santorum talks about the family being the basic unit of society. It's like, no, the individual is the basic unit of society. If you want to see the family being the basic unit of society, look at any authoritarian regime in the 20th century who, when one person from the family messed up and crimes against the state, everybody in the family got killed for it. That's what that means.
Mm-hmm. So a little bit off topic, but if bad people are going to be bad, and if power is going to seek power, are we supposed to count on society, on a collection of individuals to just denounce, the bad people and power seeking power? Jeff?
Honestly, in the term society, I'm not a fan of, because a lot of terrible things have been done because this is for the good of society. There is no society. There is groups of individuals. Yeah. Not to digress too much, but as individuals, we need to, when the power struggle gets too one-sided, or even if it gets at all one-sided, we need to use our power. There's way less of them than there are of us.
Yeah, that kind of reminded me of, like the the statist argument, especially when it comes to gun rights, it's like, well, they got tank and nukes, the army, and what's your AR-15 going to do? It's like, okay, well, first of all of those are overseas. We've got like 900 military bases in 120 different countries. So this is going to come down to police departments. They're going to have to enforce this. And you go back to 1992, and the LAPD couldn't even handle the corner of Florence and Normandy. So I think we'll be fine if the entire city revolts. So that may be the way to hold people responsible with tax dollars. Now, I'm not an advocate for violence. I'm not that. I'm not the what's that? Hans Hermann Hoppe. I think that guy would have gulags if he had his way. So I don't come from that brand of libertarian, anarchist thought, objectivist thought. Very much a non-aggression principle type of person.
Mm-hmm. What is the safest way to invest for the future? Is it stocks, mutual funds, gold, property?
Yes. So I look at it, and I've got a little bit of a background in finance. It just kind of comes with money and banking and stuff like that with university economics education. I look at it like a couple of different things. So gold and cryptocurrency and those types of things, those are like put options. That's the way to hedge your bet. But you can play with this. There's a lot of people that became billionaires from the housing collapse because they saw what was coming and they were able to short the housing market, and they got put options on their, like a lot of investment banks. People think this is nefarious. It's insurance, basically. You buy an investment and then you buy a put option on that investment so that if it fails, you still get paid. The market provides that for investment banks. It's a good idea. You'd want insurance on your investment. So, things like that will hedge your bet. But yeah, property is a very good, the Federal Reserve's not going to launch interest rates like they did under Paul Volcker in the 80s. We're not going to see 25% interest rates to get inflation under control. It's not going to happen. So assets are always going to inflate. The stock market's always going to be bailed out. If people want just kind of general investment advice, I would say, the joke going around now is I'll sell when Nancy Pelosi sells. Well, that's actually really good advice because she has insider info. So just do what she does and you'll be fine. If you have a large amount of capital, put it in a too big to fail bank because we know they're going to get bailed out. That $250,000 FDIC limit doesn't apply to people that have their money in too big to fail banks. They're going to get all their money back. So, use the system to your advantage. If you know inflation is coming, the stock market has done this for years. Investment banks have done this for years. When the rate of inflation is higher than the rate of interest, you're getting money for free. Find out how and take advantage. Know the industries that the government's going to bail out when they start to falter, and you'll never lose your money. And then, if you're concerned about inflation, then go after commodities that don't inflate. Gold, is way ahead of the rate of inflation right now because so many people are buying in. Cryptocurrency is a great way to do that. But those are ways to hedge your bet and, investing in industries that are not going to fail because the government won't allow them to, and putting your money in banks that aren't going to fail because the government won't allow them to. That's the bet. So that's where you make your bet, and then you hedge your bet with things like gold and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You know what the expectations are going to be, and you know what the engineering is on these markets, so take advantage of it. That's plenty of people have done that. And there are guys, and it's sad because, you're betting against the American economy and the housing market, and you're betting that people are going to lose their jobs. But, somebody's setting this expectation within the state, and we know it's going to happen, so take advantage of it. And then, start a charity to feed hungry people. And that's efficiency. You're taking this money away from people who are going to, use it inefficiently. Make it more efficient. Be an innovator.
So you would rather have a savings account with like a national chain like Chase Bank or something than, a single bank that's just like one person in accounting?
If you have a ton of cash and savings that's going to go over that $250,000 FDIC limit, definitely put it in a too big to fail bank. You can put it all in the same bank. Bank of America is not going to fail. The government will not allow it to fail. We've already seen that. ING is the same way. ING used to do savings accounts. I don't know if they do anymore or not, but I think it's Voya now or something. But Chase is another one. Some of those, what are they, like thrifts, like savings? A lot of those big investment banks will have savings and loan thrift things attached to them. Go for it. Investment banking actually did let one fail, but too big to fail commercial banks. If you have a lot of capital that you want to save, don't put it in your little community bank. If it goes under, you're only getting back to that FDIC limit.
Well, that's actually the end of my questions for today. I think this has been awesome. Thank you guys both so much for coming on.
Yeah.
Hey, thanks.
Let's see here. Alex, do you have any charities or organizations you'd like to shout out?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of St. Jude's, and a big fan of Doctors Without Borders. And it's kind of coincidental that they're related to healthcare, but that's where a lot of people seem to believe in the narrative that this country has a history of just people dying in the streets without medical care. I mean, they believe that today, and it's just not true. It's expensive, and there's a lot to say about that. We could have another conversation for 2 hours on healthcare if you guys want to do this again. But yeah, I mean, that's right there is for me. There's definitely the selfish part of it that says like, look, this right here is just proving everybody wrong who wants Medicare for all. That doctors, more importantly, I mean, yeah, it's a good living to make, and but more importantly, they're driven to do research. They don't. It's kind of like college professors, not to its extreme of degree, but college professors don't get paid to teach; they get paid to research, and that's part of what doctors do too. And so, being able to get their hands on people that may have a condition that's a little bit different than what they've seen before. This is how we discover new diseases and come up with new treatments, and that's their primary goal. And that's why things like Doctors Without Borders and St. Jude's exist. Like, of course, it's there to help the people who need it, and they provide their services for free. But more importantly, what's coming from that is new case studies and new information that they may not have seen before. And these are extremely smart people who spent over a decade in educational and occupational education or training to do their jobs. So those are two very important charities to me, just because of the implications that it has to solve so many problems in the human condition.
Yeah, absolutely. That's awesome. Jeff, I can just copy and paste from the last episode, or did you have any any different organizations you want to shout out to?
Nothing new today. Still sticking with DonorC, because any charity that can cut out the middleman and and show you that your money has gone to help these people directly. I mean, it's hard to have an issue in a group like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Things like this are important, to spread the message, let people know where we stand. I don't care if people convert to believe what I believe. That's not what I'm out here for. I'm not here to proselytize. I'm not an evangelical about anarchism. My goal is to say I don't care about what you think, and I don't have to care. And I'm going to live my life whether you like it or not. My life belongs to me and not you. Freedom means I do what I want to do, not what you want me to do. So that's the goal for me in spreading the message. It's not so much to get people to convert into libertarianism or anarchism or objectivism. It's to say, we're going to do what we do regardless whether you like it or not. So, I think it's important to continue to get that message out there.
Kind of my goal for this channel is just, it's to promote understanding, sympathy and compassion with all sides, because I think all sides have merit at some point.
Sure.
And also just kind of to incept people with a little bit of anarchist mindset.
Well, I think if we could just get people to realize like how ridiculous the state is in its functioning and its implementation, just even a little bit, just starting with education, like, look at the VA when it comes to healthcare, just little things like that. And it kind of gets people thinking, it's like, yeah, you know what? Probably shouldn't hand over the entire healthcare system to the same people who created the largest prison population on the planet and who, bombed the Middle East every 14 seconds since 1955. So, or whatever, there's people that conduct war and put people in jail and are responsible for, misery all over the world. Those are not the people that you want in control of your healthcare. And, some people are never going to back down from that stance, and that's fine. I hope they get what they want. Maybe they'll learn the hard way. But, I'm with you on that. And the goal for me is just to get those little pieces of information out there. Every little bit we can chip away from the state, the better, the more we're going to flourish.
Yeah, awesome. There's so many ideas that people don't even consider. Like they're so used to how things have been, and of course, since it has been that way, it must be good. And then they're told that the state is great from kindergarten through graduation. There's nothing creepy about dead presidents staring at you for 12 years.
Wait, so you mean to tell me that you go to public government funded schools and you don't hear any indictments about the public funders?
It's crazy, I know.
You mean to tell me that the state's not going to give you the education that you need to overthrow them in their own schools?
Look, man, I pledged allegiance to that flag. Okay?
I thought that's what government schools. I thought that's what they did, was teach people how to overthrow the power that they created.
Well, apparently that's what UT does.
Right.
So.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, that's I don't know, man. It's I could do a 6 or 8 hour symposium on how bad the indoctrination is. It's like, I mean, there's no way you can continue to just get older and actually use your brain and think and still believe those things. You know, they're telling you you're stupid right in front of your face, and then you believe it for a little while. So, you know, it's almost insulting. It is. It's almost insulting. All other things held constant. That's almost insulting.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, once again, thank you guys so much for being on here. I really appreciate it. We'll definitely talk again.
Yeah, sounds good.